With that, I would like Katsuri to start and really give us an understanding of the history of this model. What problem is it really solving in the industry? And take it from there.
Sure. Thanks, Beth. Let us look at the evolution of commerce and then understand how that triggered the evolution of models from ISO ISVs to Payfacs. We look at it in three time periods: 1970s, 2000, 2010. Let's go all the way back to the 1970s. What did the world look like 50 years ago? Clearly, there were no credit card payments. These days, we look at volumes processed by Apple Pay versus MasterPass, but volume processed with credit cards, with debit cards, was zero. In fact, the first of the processors, like First Data, were being established. The first set of terminals were established and deployed at places like Dillard's. So clearly, card acceptance was beginning to become one of the payment methods, and as merchants added card acceptance and became much more a popular method of payment, big processors like First Data needed more foot on the ground, and that led to the birth of ISOs, or independent sales organizations. Clearly, as the name suggests, ISOs are nothing but sales organizations, at least that's how they started off. And over the next few decades, as card acceptance increased, so did the evolution of ISOs happen. In short, ISOs who started off as sales further differentiated amongst themselves with much better customer support by taking on that liability, by also providing much better analytics. Now, as again the terminals became smarter by software partners, in creating much more integrated offering, that led to ISV, or integrated software vendors, that now led to some of the smartest POS terminals that we see. Now let's move on to the second period, which is 2000s, early 2000s. We are still about 20 years ago, and the biggest change was e-commerce, right? E-commerce was beginning to take place, and again, less than 1% of all commerce was e-commerce. However, some of the big merchants started to use add online commerce as well, and what that meant was it was no longer buying a terminal, plugging it in. It actually meant that they had to integrate with the payment processor, and that led to the next generation of ISOs as well as gateways to make that ISO 8583 integration simpler. Now, let's fast forward by 10 more years. We are now 2010. Now, clearly, there is commerce both online as well as offline happening with credit cards. Small, large, enterprise were all processing. This time around, there was yet another interesting turn where even individuals started processing transactions, wanted to do commerce both online as well as in addition to offline. And what this meant is, as sharing economies increased, right? Individuals, for instance, it could be a friend of yours who is creating a storefront on Shopify, or listing their property on a sharing economy like Airbnb or HomeAway. For all of these individuals who are now micro merchants, risk and I would say trust and safety had to be reimagined. The traditional mechanisms of underwriting will no longer cut, and that led to the birth of payment facilitator. If you think of it, if an individual were to be asked, clearly they're not payment nerds like any of you in this hall, if they were to ask the last few processing statements or create a business case, they would stick to a check being cut by the buyer once the order is fulfilled. right? Clearly, all of the players lose because there is that less trust and safety between the buyer and the seller on the sharing economy. The sharing economy platforms like HomeAway and Airbnb completely lose out on the economics and processing for the volume, providing a much better experience. And last but not the least, Visa, MasterCard lose out on that offline transaction. And this model, the biggest difference it introduced is that, yes, the underwriting can be moved to the master merchant, aka the payment facilitator, and they in turn can underwrite all of the hundreds of thousands of merchants. But in addition, for the first time, the card brands allowed the payment facilitators to disperse the funds, manage complex billing, manage complex disbursements to multiple parties that are involved in that ecosystem. Now, clearly, as e-commerce evolves and we have newer types of commerce, so will these models. So looking forward to, Payfacs in turn also evolving.
Thank you, Katsuri. That was really great evolution of where we've been the last couple of decades and sort of teasing up where we're going to go in the future. And we're getting some questions in about that, so we'll take them in just